I never imagined that 50 years of anger could melt away in a single, life-changing moment. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. My heart raced as I stepped into that dimly lit room, each breath heavy with the weight of the past. It was as if time itself held its breath. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the ache that had settled in my bones for decades. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness. I clenched my trembling hands, my palms slick with sweat. Faces blurred around me, a collection of expressions ranging from disbelief to curiosity. I caught a glimpse of my mother, eyes filled with unshed tears, and for a brief second, I wondered if this would be the day we would finally confront our long-standing rift. 50 years of anger bubbled beneath the surface, simmering, threatening to erupt. I could sense it in the whispers that floated through the air, like stagnant smoke clinging to the rafters. How did we get here? My relationship with my parents had always been strained, woven with a history of hurt and unspoken words. My father, a looming figure of disappointment, seemed smaller in that moment. I barely recognized him as the man who had once towered over my childhood, his expectations pushing me into a life of defiance. But there, in the stillness, something shifted. A flicker of hope danced in the corner of my heart. Could this really be the moment everything changes? It felt like the uncertainty of a storm waiting to break, heavy with promise. I could hear my pulse thundering in my ears. I closed my eyes for a heartbeat, willing the chaos to quiet. It was the perfect setup for something monumental. Just then, a sudden crash echoed throughout the room, shattering the silence. Glass shattered, and I jolted, my heart leaping into my throat. People gasped, their gasps merging into a cacophony of concern. My skin prickled. What was happening? And then she appeared. A figure cloaked in mystery, her long coat swirling around her like shadows. Who was she? I could feel her eyes, penetrating and knowing, as they locked onto mine. A stranger that somehow felt familiar. She stepped forward, and the commotion in the background faded, as if she commanded our attention. "That I know why you're here," she said, her voice low and steady. It wrapped around me like a dimly lit secret. Instinctively, I took a step toward her, driven by something deep, something I couldn't yet name. The weight of all my struggles bore down upon me, a crushing force, but I felt a spark ignite in that moment. "What do you mean?" I pressed, the question tumbling out before I could catch it. The room grew quieter, the gravity of her presence capturing everyone. All eyes were on us. She smiled enigmatically, the corner of her lips curling, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. "You have the power to change everything. Just, let go." The room spun. My heart raced. Had I heard her correctly? Could I really let go? As the tension thickened, a sudden realization struck. What if her words were true? What if this was the moment to sever the chains of my past? But as quickly as hope surged, doubt crept in. Could I actually face my family after all these years? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The room was heavy with anticipation as I stood transfixed, the strange woman's words echoing in my mind. You have the power to change everything. Just, let go. Could it really be this simple? A tantalizing flame flickered to life within me, yet shadows of doubt threatened to extinguish it. The stranger continued to watch me, her gaze imbued with a knowing that felt unnerving yet safe. My heart raced, caught between a powerful urge to embrace this chance for transformation and an equally potent fear of what it might mean to shatter the pattern of my past. That my mother's muffled sob drew my attention. She stood apart from the crowd, her hands trembling at her sides, a monument of grief and regret. I caught sight of her face, etched with lines of sorrow, and I felt a pang of longing to reach out, to hold her and finally tell her that I understood for once. I yearned to bridge the chasm between us, but doubt clawed at my throat like a vice. What if letting go meant betraying the anger that had defined me for so long? The air felt charged, heavy with unsaid words as I took a step closer to the woman, drawn by her enigmatic presence. Let go of what? I managed to ask, my voice shaky yet laced with a desperate hope. Of fear, of pain, of old wounds that no longer serve you, she replied, her eyes sparkling with depth. The choice is yours. Embrace vulnerability, and you may find healing. And for a fleeting moment, the world around me began to blur again, faces melting into one another as I became acutely aware of my own loneliness. Wouldn't it be liberating to shed the burden of decades off that haunting silence, of our cruel misunderstandings? My father had fallen silent, watching us with a mix of bewilderment and fear, his own demons circling like vultures. What did he feel at that moment? The tension in the room thickened, and it felt as if everyone held their breath, waiting for me to make a choice. I glanced at my parents, the gulf between us palpable. I could either hold on to the bitterness that had shaped my life or on the thought sent a shiver down my spine. Step into the unknown and open my heart. Will you help us? I found myself asking the woman, my voice small and yet echoing with raw honesty. Only you can help yourself, she replied gently, her words like a balm on my aching spirit. But I can guide you through this. To discover forgiveness, you must be willing to face the truth of your heart, no matter how raw it may feel. A silence enveloped us, and time seemed to stretch indefinitely, pulsing with the rhythm of unfulfilled desires and regrets. My throat tightened as I thought of years wasted on misunderstandings and pride. Would stepping into the light mean losing the part of me that had fought so hard to survive? Then, a glimmer of movement caught my eye. My mother shifted slightly, and her expression transformed. I have always loved you, she whispered, as if the admission had broken free from the bonds of history. The simple truth penetrated the fog of resentment that clouded our shared past. Her pain was palpable, her vulnerability echoing my own. I took a step forward, the distance between us growing smaller with each heartbeat, yet my heart was still torn. In that moment, the walls of anger and grief began to crack, a glimmer of hope shining through. Just then, the distant wail of sirens broke the stillness, disrupting our fragile connection. My father placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me to this moment, while anxiety rippled through the room. Stay connected, said the woman behind me, her presence lingering like twilight. I faced my parents again, determined to engage in this fragile dance of reconciliation. I could feel the shared history pressing down upon us like a shroud, yet beneath lay an unexpected keenness, a desire to mend broken bonds. And then, just as I was ready to speak, just as the air seemed brimming with possibility, a heavy knock interrupted us. The door burst open, and a familiar figure lurched through, panic etched on his face. Grace. It's urgent. My brother. My heart sank as dread filled the room like uninvited guests. What had happened? The previous moment of hope fractured, replaced instantly by uncertainty. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, shadows darkening the new light that had begun to emerge. Can't you see we're in the middle of something important? I cried out, my voice trembling with frustration and fear. The world felt impossibly small again, the old patterns rushing back like surging tides. Mom. Dad. You need to listen, something's wrong. He shouted, drawing our attention into a storm far greater than any resentment we clung to. I felt the fragments of hope slip through my fingers, and just as I looked into my mother's eyes, I understood that the storm had arrived, threatening to engulf all the tentative steps we had just begun to take. The room plunged into chaos as my brother's words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. Panic etched itself across my father's face, and my mother's expression shifted from heartbreak to alarm. I stood frozen, trapped between the remnants of our long-overdue confrontation and the apprehension that now threatened to tear us apart. What's going on? I demanded, my voice shaking as I fought to hold on to the fragile hope that had begun to sprout. What's wrong? It's about Anna, he stammered, his eyes darting to our parents, who shifted closer to him. I could see the desperation in his posture, the way his hands trembled as they clutched at the edges of his shirt. She needs help, and it's really urgent, Anami little sister. The very mention of her name sent a jolt of fear coursing through me. The tangled webs of our past seemed unimportant now, they felt impossibly small against the enormity of concern for her. My brother's revelation shattered the tender moment we had begun to nurture. What do you mean, she needs help? My mother rushed forward, her previous vulnerability washed away by the tide of maternal instinct. Is she hurt? She's in the hospital, he gulped, the words coming in jagged breaths. There was an accident. She has been really struggling. I didn't know how to tell you. The air thickened with dread, and in that suffocating silence, I could see my father's eyes glaze over with panic. He was a man built on control, a rock in the storm, but now, he simply swayed, lost. In the shadow of our family's mounting crises, all three of us became unwitting accomplices in the healing, the hurt, and the uncharted territories of sorrow. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I heard myself say, the anger seeping into my words uninvited. The fight to keep the facade alive felt futile now, as if the world had conspired to bring our truth crashing down like a fragile house of cards. You let us all linger here, mired in our own feelings, while Shay was scared, he interjected, his voice thin and strained. I didn't think you'd care, not after everything that's happened. But it's about her. She needs all of us. If we don't come together now. His voice trembled, a mix of fear and frustration, and we all felt the breaking point pulse through the room. I stood between my parents, feeling the weight of choice press on my chest. I could feel my mother's eyes searching me for direction, for strength. Flashes of our shared past collided in my mind, excruciating misunderstandings, unspoken words, yet here we were, standing against a new threat. Let's go, I finally whispered as the air shifted and the tendrils of anger slipped away. Let's be there for her. We turned towards the door, and the strange woman's voice echoed in my heart again, reminding me that vulnerability was more than a choice, it was a lifeline to the people we loved. The unsteady ground we had begun to tread together now felt vulnerable yet resolute. As we stepped away from our past, I took my parents' hands in mine, weaving our fingers together, threading our lives in collective concern rather than isolation. The drive to the hospital was fraught with silence, each heartbeat thunderous in its urgency. The city's lights blurred past us as dusk settled into night, like fireflies surrendering to the encroaching dark. My heart raced, a mix of dread and fervent hope swirling within me. Each new revelation somehow mirrored the chaotic tapestry of our past but dimmed beneath the flickering possibility of renewal. Upon arriving, we rushed through the sterile corridors, our footsteps echoing against cold tiles. The sterile smell of antiseptic hung in the air, mingling with the sweet, haunting scent of impending loss. Time became a fickle construct as we hurried towards the small room where the machines beeped rhythmically, a sharp reminder of Anna's fragility. As we approached, I caught snippets of voices, medical staff speaking in hushed tones, discussing treatments, consequences, uncertainty. My heart twisted painfully. Suddenly, it felt like all of our misunderstandings, our anger, became inconsequential compared to the responsibility of being a family, facing this together. Then I froze as I reached the doorway. The room was dimly lit, and the sight that greeted me sent shockwaves through my heart. Anna lay on the bed, fragile and bruised, tubes snaking around her delicate form, a mix of monitors beeping softly like the whisper of her waning strength. The sight of her made my knees weak as I sensed a tidal wave of grief, guilt, and love crashing over me. Just then, through the din of chaos, I felt a hand squeeze mine, my mother's warmth stirring something deeper within me. I looked up at her, and to my surprise, I found tears glistening in her eyes as she nodded for me to step forward. Grace, she needs you, she said, and her voice felt like an unexpected beacon illuminating the darkness. The mysterious weight of fear shifted slightly as I approached, and when I looked down at Anna, my heart shattered anew. You're going to be okay, I whispered, full of desperate hope, the floundering shadows of resentment dimming in her presence. We're all here for you. As I reached out to take her hand, I felt the world around me begin to spin, an overwhelming tide of the past threatening to pull me back. But then, amid my dizzying fears, I recalled the woman's words. The power to change everything lay within me, and just as clarity dawned upon me, a heavy knock reverberated in the doorway. I turned sharply, my heart racing as another familiar figure filled the entrance, the lines of his face tight with worry. "Grace!" He rushed forward, his voice laced with urgency. But before he could speak, I caught a glimpse of something dark behind him, a small bundle swathed in bright fabric, the unmistakable outline of a child. And just like that, a new avalanche of uncertainty cascaded over our family. What new challenge had arrived at this worst moment? My heart thundered in my chest as I was left teetering on the brink of emotional devastation yet again. The moment froze in time as I peered into the doorway, my mind racing to comprehend what had just materialized. It was as though the fabric of my reality had been warped, stretched to its breaking point. I felt trapped, caught between the urgent need to comfort Anna and the whirlwind of confusion unfurling in front of me. "Mark," my brother broke the silence that echoed through the room, his voice a low tremor against the pulling tide of fear. "What are you doing here?" "Grace," he gasped, breathing heavily. "I didn't know where else to go. Please, I didn't think you'd be here." Each word fell from his lips like a desperate plea, and the sight of him, usually so composed, unraveled a knot of worry within me. As I met his gaze, it was clear he was gearing up for a battling emotional one that filled the air with a heightened tension. I could see a flicker of desperation behind his concern, a familiar pain lurking just beneath the surface. But standing behind him, a small figure clung tightly to his leg. It was Millie, his daughter, her big round eyes shimmering with innocence and concern. She didn't understand the weight of the moment, yet here she was, a ghost of hope amidst the chaos. "Is Auntie Anna going to be okay?" Millie asked, her sweet voice cutting through the heaviness like a delicate chime. I felt my heart constrict painfully. The juxtaposition of her innocence against the turmoil of our family left me reeling. I knelt down so we were at eye level, forcing a smile onto my trembling lips, desperate to reassure her. "She's a fighter, sweetheart. She's going to be just fine." Her worried gaze met mine, searching for the truth behind my words. Something in her expression melted a bit of the icy panic that had gripped me since entering the hospital. I could feel the warmth of compassion blooming in that tiny moment, a flicker of light amid the engulfing darkness. "Mark," I said, returning my attention to my brother, my voice unwavering yet softening as I spoke. "Why didn't you call us? We could have been here sooner." It felt essential to press, to weave the strands of our fractured family together one more time. "That I didn't want you to worry. You've all had enough to deal with, and I thought I could handle it," he explained, avoiding my gaze. But I couldn't. There were moments I just didn't know what to do. The truth of abandonment loomed large between us, a harsh reminder of our shared history etched deeply in scars both seen and unseen. We had left each other in isolated silos of regret, and now, brought together by Anna, the weight of that distance felt insurmountable. Millie, sensing the heaviness, chimed again, "Can we see her?" Her innocent urgency wrapped around us like a warm hug, a tether drawing us back to the present. "Yes," I replied, standing up and motioning for them to join me. "We all need to be there for her, now more than ever." As I stepped toward Anna's room, my heart raced, both at the responsibility resting upon my shoulders and the glimpse of solidarity building between us. But just as we crossed the threshold, Mark's hand gripped my arm, stopping me in my tracks. "Wait, Grace." His voice had shifted, the hesitation palpable as he struggled to find his words. "Before we go in, there's something you need to know. Something about why Anna was in that accident." The air crackled with tension. My world tilted again. Did he mean to say what I thought he might? My body tensed, instinctively leaning away from whatever truth he was about to unearth. The threads of hope I had just begun to weave felt frayed and brittle beneath the weight of his words. "What do you mean?" I asked, my stomach twisting. "There was a quarrel," he said slowly, collecting himself despite the fear radiating off him. "Something between her and Jeremy. He didn't want her to go out that night, but she insisted. I think it might have escalated. I found some messages and they weren't good." Grace. My heart sank as he revealed the cracks that had formed in Anna's world, a world I had so desperately fought to heal. The memories of our childhood flooded back, the secrets we had guarded for so long now seeping out like dark secrets. Had yet another shadow of our past come back to haunt us in the most heart-wrenching way possible? "Mark, stop," I whispered fiercely. "You can't say things like that right now. She's in there fighting for her life." "But it's important," he insisted, a tremble of desperation in his voice. "If this goes deeper than just an accident, we have to brace ourselves. We might not be ready for what's to come." With every word, the reality of our family's fracture felt more pronounced, raw against the backdrop of Anna's fragile state. I could feel the collective weight drawing tighter, creating a prism through which our tangled feelings refracted. "No," I said, shaking my head defiantly. "Let's just focus on her." Together we stepped into the room, the sterile scent hitting my nostrils like a cold shower. I could feel the weight of the quietness pressing down on us, stark against the chaos that lay waiting beneath the surface. Anna's small body lay motionless, and for a moment, it felt as though the world outside ceased to exist. "Please wake up, Anna," I murmured, stepping closer. "We need you to fight." And yet, as I looked up, the haunting uncertainty of what lay ahead consumed me. I turned back to my brother and Millie, seeking refueled resolve from the two people standing steadfastly beside me. The inklings of love and kinship brewed silently among us, encouraging us to stand strong. But the countdown was beginning, and the clock was ticking down toward revelation. For as much as I wanted to shield my family from further heartbreak, the truth that Mark had surfaced loomed like a storm on the horizon. As we gathered around Anna, praying silently for her recovery, I realized that sometimes, the most painful truths must surface to allow for healing. But would we be ready for that burden when it came crashing down? As the hushed sound of machines filled the room, I felt the weight of my heart pull me down, my thoughts consumed by a fear that clawed at my insides. Anna remained still, her features softened by the fluorescent lights, yet an unshakable bond connected us, a bond that threads through the brokenness, flowing with shared struggles and unspoken hopes. Time slipped away as we stood there, silhouettes of worry and love, holding our breaths as if our unity could somehow mend the fracture that had brought us here. Mark's presence, always that of the quiet guardian, now felt heavy with unsaid words, and I sensed that beneath his composed exterior lay the same storm that stirred within me. "Millie, why don't you draw a picture for Auntie Anna?" I suggested, hoping to distract her from the intensity of the moment. Her little hands abstractly gripped the crayons I had stashed in my bag, and as she leaned over the paper, the innocence of childhood washed over us. "What should I draw?" she asked, her brow knitted in concentration. "How about a sunny day?" I replied, letting a small grin escape my lips. "Anna loves those." The bustling energy of her creativity lightened the air, and I temporarily allowed myself to believe that hope was not just an elusive vapor hanging over us, but a tangible thread weaved through our lives. I could almost feel Anna with us, urging us to keep drawing, keep creating, and keep living, despite the uncertainty that loomed. "Look, Mom. Isn't it pretty?" Millie beamed a few minutes later, showcasing a wild landscape inundated with swirls of vibrant colors. My heart swelled seeing her joy, a reminder that even amid despair, little miracles exist. "Beautiful, sweetheart. Just like your Auntie Anna," I whispered, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Mark knelt beside her, his demeanor momentarily shifting as he admired her art, the steel around his heart softening in that fleeting moment of shared simplicity. But beneath this fragile veil of warmth, the shadows lurked, waiting for a crack through which to seep back into our lives. Suddenly, a nurse appeared, her expression professional yet aware, as if she were not merely delivering a report but a weight that would settle heavy in our minds. "I have to update you on her condition," she said, glancing at each of us in turn. "There are some additional tests we need to perform. Her vitals are stable, but we want to monitor her closely." I felt my stomach twist as a familiar dread clawed at my insides. "What do you mean by additional tests?" I asked, the earlier warmth now cold as reality began to seep back in. "There is a chance we may need to do a CT scan to rule out any potential complications," she replied cautiously. The way she framed her words felt like it hung between hope and despair, an uncertainty that gnawed at the back of my mind. Will she be awake for the tests? Millie asked, her voice innocent yet laced with underlying fear. No, honey, the nurse responded gently. They'll keep her asleep for a while longer, but it's only to ensure she's comfortable that I felt the walls of our bubble begin to close in. Millie, sweet Millie, needed more than vague assurances, she needed safety, particularly in this unfamiliar landscape where the uncertain reigned supreme. Let's take a little break, I suggested, attempting to keep the peace, wishing to shield Millie from the encroaching reality until the shadows retreated once more. As we stepped out of the room, I felt a chill in the air, a palpable tension that seemed to stretch between Mark and me, one that needed to be addressed but felt heavier than concrete. Grace, he began, his voice shaking ever so slightly. I cut him off before he could finish, not wanting to delve into discussions about what lay beneath surface wounds tonight. Can we just focus on Anna for now? We can talk later. I didn't mean for it to come out the way it did, Mark admitted, his eyes betraying a labyrinth of emotions not easily read. I only wanted you to understand, but it feels like everything is breaking down around us. That I understand, I said, my own voice mere breath. But Anna needs us to hold it together. For her. But as we exchanged this charged silence, a new wave of realization washed over me, a creeping sense that perhaps our long-held grudges, the unsorted pocket of anger and sorrow bound up inside both of us, might yet unravel in unexpected ways. Could the fragile thread of connection be mended, or would it snap under the weight of unveiling truths? I glanced back through the glass window into Anna's room, the rhythmic beeping of the machines echoing our unease. She lay there, encased in the sterility of white sheets, vulnerable yet heroic. Suddenly, Millie tugged on my hand, interrupting my reverie. Can we say a prayer for Auntie Anna? Her earnest request burst forth with sincerity, a light spilling into the melancholic atmosphere as I realized she was not just a little girl lost in her drawings, she was our compass, pointing towards hope even amidst all this despair. Of course, I said, kneeling down to her level, hoping with everything within me that my voice steadied the tremor of uncertainty. Let's pray together. For her and for us. We formed a small circle, hands clasped, our eyes shut tight, and the words fell from my lips, an unsteady but earnest prayer for hope, recovery, and the strength to face whatever might come next. In the sanctuary of that moment, I found a sliver of clarity. It was a small but potent space of warmth, a testament to our family ties woven together through love, uncertainty, and the promise of enduring presence. But just as the ends of our prayers dissipated into the air, Mark's phone buzzed loudly in his pocket, shattering that fragile stillness. His face paled as he looked at the screen, abruptly interrupting the quiet resoluteness we had managed to construct. What is it? I asked, my heart pounding, bracing myself for what news could possibly be lurking behind that disruptor. Mark stared, frozen, only to mutter breathlessly, "It's Jeremy. He's trying to contact me. It says it's urgent." The air thickened once again, the looming storm cloud rolling in, pulsing with charged conversations that had long remained unspoken. There it was, the unexpected twist that threatened to unravel everything we'd built in those few fleeting moments. "Should I answer it?" he asked, his hand trembling as he lifted the phone, and I could only watch wide-eyed, knowing instinctively that whatever decision he made next would shift the course of our fate. The hum of the machine faded into the background as tension gathered in the air. Mark's hand hesitated above his phone, the dim light from the screen illuminating his face, casting shadows that reflected the turmoil within him. I felt the weight of the moment, understanding that it wasn't just a phone call, it was the catalyst that could ignite conversations filled with vulnerability and hurt, or further tighten the chains of silence that bound our family. "Mark," I urged softly, "if you think it's important, you should take it. We can manage here." His gaze remained fixated on the screen, his expression a study of conflict, a tug-of-war between duty and the daunting past we both carried like heavy packs on our backs. The name, Jeremy, was a ghost that lingered in our history, a thread taut with unresolved grievances. The air thickened as he finally pressed the button, bringing the phone to his ear. "Jeremy," he spoke, his voice cautious as though stepping onto a battlefield. I could only stand there, half present, my thoughts racing. "Is it about Anna?" I whispered urgently to Millie, who stood clutching my hand, confusion flickering in her wide eyes. Shoo, just listen, I replied, dragging my gaze to Mark once more. Yeah, okay, no, I can't talk right now, Mark said. The rising pitch of his tone heightened the anxiety in my chest, the impression that something deep and festering was about to resurface into the light. I need to focus on Anna. She's not doing well. In that instant, the world around us blurred. I could only hear snippets of Mark's conversation, each word like a needle tracing through my skin. The solemnity in his voice twisted my heart, while Millie tugged my sleeve, her innocence encapsulated in the question etched across her face, Mom, why is he sad? I could barely meet her eyes, the concern pooling within me as I fumbled through my thoughts to find a way to explain a complexity far beyond her reach. Sometimes grown-ups have difficult conversations. But we're all here for Auntie Anna, and we'll keep doing our best, Millie nodded, though I could see the uncertainty linger in her gaze, echoing the tremor in my own heart. Mark's voice drifted back into the fray, rising as the context of the call began to swirl around us. Look, he'll call you back, he said sharply, his tone now hardened. Right now, my priority is my family. He hung up abruptly, his face taut as the tension crackled through the air, replacing the soft veil of prayer with jagged shards of emotion. Mark, I began, not quite knowing which version of him I'd find the strategic compliance he often resorted to, or the raw man buried under years of guilt and anger. Grace, we can't keep doing this. I cannot keep pretending everything's fine while we're being pulled apart by whatever this is. His frustration lashed against me like a sudden storm. I wish I could just go back and fix the things we let slip. All the years wasted. As he spoke, I could see the walls had built crumbling just slightly, revealing the fear that lay at their core: fear of loss, fear of failure. It's not just about us, Mark. We have to be strong for her. Maybe it's too late to be strong, he shot back, his voice breaking, carrying a weight that fell between us, a shared grief that had festered like an untreated wound. Millie's small frame seemed to shrink, her innocence shrinking beneath the weight of our conflicts. I pulled her closer to me, kissing the top of her head, wishing I could shield her from everything that loomed just outside our grasp, especially the distance that had started to carve a place between Mark and me. In that moment, the sounds of the hospital faded, and the relentless beep of the machines surrounding Anna punctuated the silence we all clung to, a testament to life's persistence amidst chaos. Mark took a deep breath, and for a brief moment, I thought he might say something to bridge the gaping divide. Just then, a door slammed somewhere down the corridor, and a frantic voice emerged from a gathering crowd. Watch out! He's been hit. A commotion followed, echoing louder and faster, a cruel reminder of life's unpredictability. Mark and I exchanged a glance, and shock coursed through our veins. What's happening? I questioned, pulling Millie closer still. Stay right here, he instructed, and darted towards the door, propelled by an instinct that had always guided him, protect her at heart. Mark, wait. I called, but the call went unanswered amidst gathering paramedics and a frantic crowd. My heart sank with dread as I spun to Millie. We have to stay together. It's going to be okay. Remember that prayer? It's still good, but within my chest, hope flickered like a dying flame, overshadowed by the rising storm. I couldn't shake the notion that the fracture within our family was about to deepen even further, and whatever happened next could change everything. As I held Millie tightly, each moment stretched. I caught a glimpse of Mark through the chaos, amplifying the churning dread in my gut. And then, a voice broke through, a known cadence amid the turmoil. It's Jeremy. He's here. Someone help! The world tilted beneath my feet, a sense of foreboding drawing tighter as the layers of our intricate web began unraveling, exposing truths I wasn't yet ready to confront. In this moment of uncertainty, I couldn't help but wonder if all the pain, all the love, could withstand the revelation that was coming closer with every beat of my heart. The chaos spilled into the room as doctors burst through the doors, their shouts mingling with the sound of hurried footsteps. I tried to keep my gaze fixed on Millie, but the sight of Mark rushing toward Jeremy was like a gravitational pull dragging me into a vortex of fear. Stay with me, sweetheart, I said, forcing a calmness I didn't feel into my voice. Millie nodded, but her eyes, wide with confusion, mirrored my rising panic. Jeremy, my estranged brother, the one whose name had echoed through the years like a symbolic reminder of the pain we all carried, came into view. From where I stood, I could see the blood staining his clothes, a visceral reminder that life was rarely predictable. This was the man who had, more than once, cracked the fragile facade of Mark's calm, and now, here he was, the personification of our collective past. "Mom," Millie whispered, her small voice barely cutting through the din. "Yes, sweetheart," I replied, forcing a smile, my heart pounding such that I could hardly hear myself speak. "We're going to be okay. We just need to wait for the doctors to help him." But as I watched Mark crouch beside Jeremy, I felt the ground shift beneath me. The years of resentment, hurt, and unresolved arguments were tangling into the stark reality of the present. What was once an abstract idea, lifetime of anger, now loomed before us like a paper-thin veil waiting to tear open. "Stay back," a paramedic shouted, pushing the crowd away, but Mark remained, bending over his brother like a warrior attending to a fallen comrade. There was a fierceness in his love that I had often overlooked, a testament to the depths of what he felt for Jeremy, regardless of the wounds their shared history had inflicted upon him. Inside me, a war raged as old grievances clashed with fresh terror. Millie squeezed her hands over her ears, shutting out the plight of a family I had thought was broken beyond repair. How could I explain this moment to her without tarnishing the innocence that blazed in her spirit? As I bit my lip, trying to keep the tears at bay, I heard Mark's voice rise, steady and fierce. "Jeremy, stay with me. Help is here, just breathe." "You have to fight." That I wanted to scream, to plead with Mark to step away, to take care of our daughter instead of racing toward the past. But somehow, as I stood there, rooted in place, I began to realize that this moment held potential, and opportunity for healing or, perhaps, further destruction. Millie nudged me gently. "Will he be okay, Mom?" I don't know, honey." I inhaled sharply, wishing I had answers to ease her worry, while feeling impossibly disconnected from everything unfolding around us. The chaos seemed to swirl slower and faster at once, shadows clawing into my thoughts as I became a mere spectator of a family defined by shadows and secrets. As the paramedics began to assess Jeremy, I could see Mark's hands tremble, not so much with fear but rather an absolute embodiment of the conflict roiling within him. Suddenly, a nurse, her expression as serious as the stakes, appeared at my side. "Ma'am, you need to step back." "Who are you to this patient?" I faltered, caught in her intensity. "I'm his sister." "That's my brother." The words felt foreign, heavy, and yet they clung to my tongue like lost memories. It was then I saw him, Jeremy's eyes starting to flicker, struggling to find clarity amidst the chaos unfolding around him. The glimmer of consciousness struck me like a lightning bolt, igniting a fire in my heart I hadn't felt in years, yet it terrified me all the same. "Grace," Jeremy coughed out, his voice watery and raw, breaking the tension in ways I could hardly comprehend. Time hung in the air, charged with possibility, but Millie's fragile hand squeezed mine a bit too tightly in response, an anchor to the storm I was trying to navigate. "Will it be okay, Mom? Will Uncle Jeremy be okay?" Tears blurred my vision as I fought against the countless emotions threatening to drown me. "I'm not sure, Millie. But we need to be strong together, all right?" Mark turned, our eyes locking for a brief heartbeat. There was a flicker of understanding as unspoken words danced between us, a quiet truce forged in the fires of circumstance. And then, as Jeremy struggled against the prone form beneath him, a gasp escaped his lips, a breath laced with recognition. "Mark," the paramedic cut him off, urgency steeped in each of his movements. "Let's keep him stable. We need to get him to surgery." With that, the chaotic symphony grew more frenetic, each note a fight against time and heartache. The world narrowed, blurring around me, but the pull remained, tethered between past grievances and the thin, fragile line of family love. As the paramedics wheeled Jeremy away, I felt Mark's hand squeeze my shoulder. "Wait for me," he said, a whisper lost in the deafening uproar, as if the weight of the world had crumbled into this moment. In that instant of connection, I realized the costs we'd all paid over the years weren't just jail cells of ourselves, they were also the keys waiting to unlock something buried deep beneath the memories that festered like an open wound. I thought I could painfully glimpse at a world where hope flickered faintly in the restlessness of uncertainty, yet terror held fast. But as Mark followed the stretcher, our fates uncertain, a single question dug its roots deep into my heart: what if this encounter, charged with emotion, would reveal secrets that could obliterate the last thin veneer of our fragile healing? Uncertainty twisted tight around me, and I swayed, helpless in the onslaught of what lay ahead. The sterile walls of the hospital felt like they were closing in on me as I wandered the waiting area. Millie had fallen into a deep sleep, her small head resting on my lap while I tried to grasp the enormity of everything that had just happened. The thrumming of fluorescent lights overhead mirrored my restless thoughts, and the sorrow that churned in my stomach was now laced with an insidious seed of hope. I replayed Mark's last words in my head. Wait for me. Had he truly meant it, or were they just a desperate plea in the chaos? There was a bond between siblings, one that I had witnessed but never truly understood until now, and a part of me, the part that still clung to fragments of our fragmented family, hoped there was still a way back. The clock ticked slowly, each second etched in the tension of our unresolved past. I glanced at the doors leading to the surgical wards, the barriers of my heart feeling just as impenetrable. For so long, I had avoided contemplating Jeremy, avoiding the way had haunted our lives like a flickering candle that never fully extinguished. But what if this moment, the one that hinged on his fragile life, could change everything? A gentle hand landed on my shoulder, and I looked up to see an older woman with graying hair tied back in a neat bun. Her warm, brown eyes sparkled with empathetic understanding. "I couldn't help but notice you've been here for a while," she said softly, offering a knowing smile. "I thought you might need a cup of tea." That I blinked in disbelief. "Thank you, but nonsense," she interrupted, "I insist." Without waiting for my response, she motioned toward the nearby cafeteria. "Trust me, it can be hard to think clearly on an empty stomach, especially during times like these." Her kindness cut through the fog surrounding me. Ruth," she said as we walked side by side. "And you're?" "Grace," I replied, my voice hoarse with emotion. "Grace, it's a beautiful name," she said, her tone lightening the heaviness between us. "You're worried about someone close to you?" I hesitated, the lump in my throat reappearing as I considered a simple answer to such a complex question. "My brother, he's in surgery." I trailed off, unsure of how to finish. The weight of our childhood, of anger and betrayal, felt too convoluted to spill out to a stranger. Ruth stopped walking, turning to face me. "You don't have to share everything. Just know that sometimes, unexpected kindness emerges in hard times." She studied my eyes, as though trying to see into the very depths of my soul. "Family can be complicated, but remember that love lingers even in the darkest places." It was an unexpected balm to my frayed nerves, but as I looked at Millie sleeping peacefully, I felt another wave of grief wash over me. "What if it's too late for us?" I whispered, the vulnerability stinging my heart. Ruth laid a comforting hand on my arm, grounding me. "It's never too late. Sometimes, we have to reach through the pain to get to the love waiting to be found." Before I could respond, a sudden clamor erupted from the surgical bay. My heart raced as a group of doctors burst through, a sudden shift in the air drawing both Ruth and my attention. "Grace Parker," one of them called, scanning the anxious faces in the waiting area. I stood frozen, recognizing the urgency in his tone. "That's me," I managed, my voice cracking as I felt Millie stir awake. The doctor approached, his expression somber but not devoid of hope. "We've stabilized your brother, but he's in critical condition. I'm afraid he's going to need your support through this. He might not be able to speak for a while. But your presence could help him fight." I parroted, the word heavy with implications. "Fight for what?" The doctor took a deep breath, the weight of unspoken words evident in his eyes. "For a second chance," he said, a note of urgency creeping in. "For the unresolved battles and the ones still worth fighting." As he spoke, I felt something inside me shift, a tiny flicker of resolve igniting a long-dormant fire. I could be there for him, for both of them, if they would let me. It wouldn't be simple. And it wouldn't come without scars reopening, but I was willing to try. But just as quickly as my thoughts solidified, another wave of panic swept through me. As the doctor began to step away, he paused, a final warning etched into his solemn gravity. You should know, though there are things we've found, Grace, about your brother, things that might change everything. The ground shifted beneath my feet again, heart pounding in my chest as my mind raced with the possibilities. What could he possibly mean? What was it that could shatter whatever healing was left? Wait. What do you mean? I called after him, but he had already disappeared down the corridor. I turned back to Ruth, who watched me with an inscrutable expression. What if I'm not ready? I breathed, raw fear clawing at my chest. But you already are, she replied simply. It's about stepping forward, not running away from what's to come. With those words, she offered a reassuring smile, but the questions hung in my heart like dark clouds gathering, a storm just waiting to break. That my world had shifted once again, teetering between uncertainty and the promise of healing, a weight pressing down in the form of that unsaid truth. What had Jeremy been hiding? And if it was worse than I could imagine, would it tear us apart forever? In that moment of uncertainty, I felt a tear escape my eye as I cradled Millie tightly to me, knowing as I held on that the answers were closer than I imagined, but still, far enough to feel hauntingly out of reach. The antiseptic smell of the hospital lingered in the air like an unwelcome guest, but I remained anchored there in the waiting room, torn between dread and flickers of hope. Millie was still cradled against me, her small body rising and falling rhythmically with each fragile breath. As I studied her peaceful face, it struck me how small she truly was, how much depended on the fragile thread of our family. I leaned back, allowing my body to sink into the cushioned chair while my mind raced around the gaping silence left by the doctor's ominous words. Things about your brother, things that might change everything. What could it be? With every heartbeat, a sense of urgency prickled at my skin. It was a gnawing worry that gnawed not just at the edges of my consciousness, but also at the very core of who I was. Grace. A soft voice pulled me from my thoughts, and I turned to see Ruth approaching again, a warm cup of tea in her hands. The steam coiled upward, pulling me briefly into the present as I noticed her concern. I thought you might need this. I accepted the cup mechanically, the warmth both comforting and grounding. Thank you, I murmured, my voice cracking as I took a sip. The honey she added made it sweet against the bitterness in my heart, but my thoughts remained clouded. Sometimes, it helps to talk about it, Ruth prodded gently, as if sensing the weight I bore. I hesitated, picturing the walls that had built up over years. How could I possibly articulate the mixture of pain and reluctance that filled my chest? It's about my brother, he's in surgery. And my voice trailed off as I grappled with the enormity of our past, allowing embarrassment to flit across my cheeks. I've avoided the truth for too long. Truth can be terrifying, Ruth replied, her tone soothing. But it can also be liberating. The word echoed internally, intertwining with my lingering fears. What if the truth tears us apart? I asked, the question slipping out before I could hold it back. What if it exposes wounds we've worked so hard to ignore? Her gaze remained steady on mine, calm and full of compassion. Perhaps, but sometimes facing the storm brings clarity. You may find healing not just for yourself but for him, too. That I longed for reassurance, but the truth of Ruth's words felt like more weight dropped into my already burdened heart. What if I can't forgive him? Or myself? Forgiveness is a journey, she replied thoughtfully. One that can only begin by acknowledging the hurt. It's not easy, Grace. It can feel like a mountain to climb, but every step leads you closer to peace. As her words sank in, I felt a deep-rooted frustration rise within me, a tidal wave of suppressed rage threatening to crash over what was left of my composure. And what if we don't make it? I shot back, my voice rising. What if all of this waiting, this uncertainty ends with nothing but more regret? Just then, a loud crash echoed down the corridor, and I jolted upright, heart racing. A young nurse rushed past us, urgency etched on her face. We need assistance in recovery. Code Blue. Wide-eyed, I grabbed Ruth's arm. What was that? I don't know, she whispered, the color draining from her face. Panic rose within me. My mind raced to Jeremy, who was already in critical condition. Had something gone wrong? An avalanche of darker possibilities filled my mind, each more chilling than the next. I can't lose him again. I almost shouted, tears springing to my eyes. Stay focused, Grace, Ruth soothed, her hand finding mine. Breathe. But in that whirlwind of anxiety, my heart raced toward a more concerning thought: what would happen if he did not survive the surgery? Would the burden of our family's history drown me in grief while leaving the haunting words of the doctor ringing in my ears? Before we could process what was happening, another doctor appeared at a different junction. He looked frantic, and the frantic energy in his gait sent a jolt of apprehension through me. Is anyone here related to Jeremy Parker? He shouted desperately, his voice sharp and cutting through the air. I am. I called, instinctively standing. My heart hammered loudly, a war drum sounding in the silence where hope seamlessly intermingled with dread. The doctor's eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I felt as if the world around me dissolved into a blur. We need you to come with me. Panic coursed through me. What's wrong? It's about to get complicated, and I need your consent. Before I could respond, thoughts swirled around my mind like a hurricane. The dread in my gut twisted and coiled anxiously while I followed the doctor down the stark white hallway, Millie and Ruth forgotten behind me. Please, I breathed, desperation escaping. Tell me, is he okay? As the doctor turned to face me, his expression was grim yet resolute. We're still assessing his condition, but there's more at stake than just his current prognosis. The world came to a standstill as we reached a heavy door marked ICU. I closed my eyes for a fleeting moment, harboring the hope that maybe, just maybe, my brother would come through this, and I prayed for the strength to face whatever truths lay on the other side. It was a moment of fracturing silence before he said, "There are findings related to your brother's recent activities. We need to discuss them." My heart thundered as disorientation crashed into realization. The secrets. The things he had hidden. What were these findings? My hands trembled as I felt the weight of impending revelations. Please, I whispered, don't tell me it's too late. With my heart in my throat and the door pushing open before me, the darkness of what was yet to come loomed dangerously close. I felt everything inside of me wrench as I prepared to face my brother, my family, and whatever the past had ripped apart. The bright fluorescent lights of the ICU were both disorienting and eerily familiar, a sterile sanctuary filled with hushed voices and the rhythmic beeping of machines that loomed larger than life. My heart pounded in my chest like a war drum as I followed the doctor inside, my thoughts swirling like restless clouds in a storm. The room felt foreign yet charged with an unmistakable weight, the urgent presence of family, the smell of antiseptic mingling with an underlying fear that seemed to permeate the air. There he was, Jeremy, lying unconscious in an unforgiving hospital bed, tubes snaking around him like unwelcome intruders. I could see how fragile he appeared, the pallor of his skin stark against the white linens. I blinked, willing the tears that pooled in my eyes to recede, but they spilled over nonetheless. The reality of the situation crashed over me like a tidal wave. This was my brother, awake or unconscious, who had woven himself tightly into the fabric of my fears, my regrets. And now fate had laid him bare before us all. Grace, I need you to listen closely, the doctor said, pulling me from the depths of my thoughts. Jeremy has a history we've uncovered that complicates his condition. His actions have consequences, and I can't wish away what has already manifested. We need to proceed carefully. My stomach twisted at his words, each syllable lodged deep in my throat. What do you mean? I demanded, my voice cracking under the pressure of uncertainty. What kind of history? There were shadows flitting through the doctor's eyes as he continued. He was involved in activities that may have led to this accident. We believe he was intoxicated at the time, and the repercussions of that choice might have far-reaching consequences. Tears blurred my vision as anger ignited within me, a furious conflagration threatening to engulf the tiny flickers of hope I had been clinging to. Was this really the moment for revelations about his irresponsibility? He has suffered enough. Life has not been kind to any of us, and now you're telling me this? I'm not suggesting blame falls solely on him, Grace. I only mean to say that we may face upheaval, legal ramifications and familial strife. He might need more than just your emotional support to navigate this. The gravity behind his words sank into me like lead, each revelation twisting the knife deeper. I had spent years processing my own grief, but now I was being thrust back into a past I had tried to escape, one laden with secrets, betrayal, and unresolved conflict. Just then, the door pushed open again, and I turned to see Mark striding in, exhausted but resolute. At that moment, I truly felt the bond of family like a tether, pulling us into the eye of the storm. "What did they say?" he asked, his voice laced with urgency. "The doctor just told me." My words trailed off as the weight pressed down harder. In this moment, we weren't just grappling with our own pasts, we were facing Jeremy's choices and the consequences of our collective history. Jeremy was intoxicated when the accident happened, how could he? Mark's jaw clenched, anger and hurt flowing like a torrent. After everything we went through as kids. His voice broke, echoing through the sterile tiles, and I felt my heart contract painfully at the truth behind his words. Perhaps he didn't want to face it alone, the doctor murmured softly, an unexpected sympathy threading through his professional veneer. It's possible his choices were not just reckless. They might have been an expression of the emotional weight he's carried. There are many layers to this situation. For once, the realization hit hard. He had buried my anger for a long time, rooted it in disappointments, convinced myself that they were the only truths worth holding on to. But the truth had a way of ripping through the facade like a fire breaking through dry wood, relentless and consuming. What if, in my fury toward Jeremy, I had ignored the cracks that lay within our family and my own anger? Suddenly, the honor of my brother's life settled on my shoulders like an unbearable weight. Can we speak to him?" I asked hesitantly, turning my focus back to Jeremy, lying there vulnerable and silent. "Of course," the doctor replied. "But be warned, he may be disoriented. Your presence could be the anchor he needs." Mark placed a steady hand on my shoulder, both a comfort and a reminder that we stood at the edge of a chasm, poised to jump. "You go first, Grace," he urged softly. "I'll be right behind you." Taking a deep breath, I stepped toward Jeremy's bed, feeling the echo of our childhood memories wrap around me, even in this stark, sterile room. "Jeremy," I began, my voice trembling as I stood by his side. I took his hand, feeling the warmth pulse through his skin, a connection forged amid years of silence and resentment. "I'm here." The machines made their incessant beeping sounds, a stark reality anchoring me in this moment. "You have to fight, Jeremy. You cannot leave us like this. We need you." Glimmers of hope shimmered at the edges of my heart, the faintest stirring of life beneath his closed eyelids. I squeezed his hand tighter, and in that moment, something monumental shifted inside me. "I need you to hear me. Whatever has happened, whatever we've endured as a family, it doesn't have to shatter everything. We can rebuild. But together. I forgive you." The stillness stretched between us, a timeless second that felt heavy yet liberating. In the rawness of that moment, a flicker of vulnerability passed through Jeremy's expression, hidden behind the veil of unconsciousness. A soft sound broke through the silencia, a faint tear from him, a tremor, or perhaps it was just a fleeting hope flickering out. But I would not be deterred. "You can't go back to the darkness," I whispered, my heart thundering against my ribs. "You have to choose us. You have to choose light." With that, the room filled with an energy unlike anything I had ever experienced. A sense of resolution washed over me, threading together the fragmented pieces of our lives into a fragile tapestry. Mark stepped up beside me, placing his hand on the other side of the bed. "We're all in this together," he echoed, his voice softer, but determination visible within him. "You're not alone. We've missed you. I need you. Our family needs you." And at that moment, it felt like the quivering dam of our shared lives was washing away, eroding the frigid walls we had built around ourselves in a fight for survival. Time seemed to freeze around us, filled with a poignant stillness, as we stood together at the threshold of an uncertain future, our bonds tested yet fortified by the chaos of our stories. Then something incredible happened. The beeping from the machines began to accelerate, and to our utter astonishment, Jeremy's eyelids fluttered before he blinked open his eyes, and clarity washed over his expression, a flicker of recognition. "Grace?" he croaked out, his voice barely above a whisper, and in that moment, the warmth of connection blossomed anew. "Yeah, it's me," I said, tears streaming freely now, blending relief and hope. "We're all here." "I'm so sorry," he murmured, raw honesty drifting through my heart like an open wound. "I didn't want this, I know," I replied, letting the layers of my own pain rise up, paving the way for something different, something powerful. "All I want is for you to come back to us. We can fix this, together." In that fragile moment, a future began to unfurl before us, holding promises that once seemed impossible. It was a future strung together with compassion, forgiveness, and an acknowledgement of pain, one that had been buried under years of resentment. As we stood together, a family piecing ourselves back into existence, I knew that I could never erase the hurt. But through that pain and heartache, I found healing born from vulnerability and a shared commitment to light, and just before I took a breath, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, I felt a surge of strength envelop us, a collective understanding of forgiveness forged in suffering, scattered like seeds in the winds of adversity, waiting to bloom. In that moment, I realized it had all been leading to this. "Jeremy," I whispered softly, my heart brimming with love. "Welcome back." And as I looked around at my brother, my parents, and the warmth of Millie's spirit, I knew that our family could rise from the ruins, hand in hand, together into the light. The storm had passed, leaving only the faint hum of hope in its Wakea promise that together, we would start anew. It is never too late to return home.